You're listening to Mammal Watching with Charles Foley and John Hall. You can find other episodes at mammalwatching.com/podcast.
Welcome to the Mammal Watching podcast with me, Charles Foley in Minneapolis.
And me, John Hall in New York. Good morning, Charles. Good to see you. What's been happening in Minnesota?
Morning, John. Yes, well, I wanted to highlight an article that I read online recently on the online magazine called The Conversation about the discovery of a new population of Leadbetter's possum in Australia. Now, the Leadbetter's possum is a very small grey, black and white possum. It's sort of related to the striped possums and triox of New Guinea. And until recently, the species was known only from a few small populations in the Central Highlands of Victoria in southeastern Australia. So this species has a tiny range of only about 3,500 square kilometers and has quite specific habitat needs. So it needs large old trees with hollows that it uses for denning, but also smaller trees that it uses for feeding. And the big trees in particular have declined massively in Victoria, due mostly to logging. And this small range makes the Leadbetter's possum highly susceptible to stochastic events like droughts, fires, etc., which could eliminate the population. And indeed, unfortunately, the huge fires that burnt across Australia in 2009 destroyed about 40% of the species' known habitat. And surveys that have been carried out since then have found that it has actually disappeared from those burnt areas, meaning that its population has dropped by about 40% since 2009. And it is listed as critically endangered with a sort of guesstimate population of about 2,500 individuals, which is what makes the discovery of the new population, which was about 250 kilometers away in the Kosciuszko National Park. Is that how you say it? Kosciuszko?
It's Kosciuszko.
Right, okay.
Mount Kosciuszko.
Yeah. Yes, right, in the Kosciuszko National Park, which is in New South Wales. Anyway, it's what makes it all the more exciting. So this national park, it's a huge forested area, so it's about 7,000 square kilometers, and habitat modeling had suggested that it should provide suitable habitat for the possum, but extensive surveys that had been done in the past had never actually found the species in the area. However, those surveys were carried out in the days prior to camera traps, and the camera traps have revolutionized the monitoring of rare mammals. So what you do with camera trap surveys is that you set out as many traps as you have within an area, typically pointing the traps along a path or a site that might attract animals that you're hoping to find, and then you just leave them for a few weeks or months and then collect the cameras and see what photos they took. And sometimes people will provide bait to try to lure the animals in, and other times not, depending on the aim of the study. Many years ago, when we were involved in the very first camera trap surveys in Tanzania, we started out using film cameras, so basically just 36 exposures. But now they're all digital, and every camera can take tens of thousands of pictures. So then, of course, you've got to sift through all of those pictures and see if you've got any interesting ones. And for that, you use AI, which basically detects changes on a series of photographs. Well, anyway, in 2024, some biologists set up camera traps in the Kosciuszko National Park, actually to look for a different species, which was the smoky mouse. And they left the cameras up for about a year. And they've just looked through the photographs and discovered that they had 7 pictures of a Leadbetter's possum, which has been really big news among the mammal people in Australia. And not much more is known about this population other than the fact that it exists, but it does provide a form of insurance against catastrophic events like fires that might wipe out the remaining population in Victoria. So from a conservation perspective, it's really good news. Now, John, I haven't looked at your mammal list, but I'm assuming that you have seen a Leadbetter's opossum.
I have, yeah, only once, 20 odd years ago, somewhere not too far from Melbourne. I think it was a place called Yellingbo. A PhD student took me out there who was working on them. But this is an amazing story, because by Australian standards, at least, Kosciuszko is one of the sort of better known national parks. You know, it's in the busy kind of corner of Australia. It's not far from Melbourne. It's really quite close to Canberra, the capital. So for something like that to turn up there in 2025, I mean, I just love it. I don't know if you remember, Charles, when we had Tony Friend from Western Australia on the podcast ages ago, but he talked about the rediscovery of Gilbert's Potteroo in
Right.
Albany, which is another around Two People's Bay, which is another kind of busy by Australian standards national park. And this was a thing that had been lost for 100 years, and it's a sort of rabbit-sized macropod. It's a very small kangaroo, and that
Hmm.
again was hiding in plain sight. So you wonder which of the other 30-something mammals that have gone extinct in Australia in generally much more remote areas are still clinging on. Somewhere like the Kimberley, for example, which is what were the statistics? Is about as big as Germany with about 3,000 people living in it, somewhere like that.
Wow.
I feel sure there is other things out there that we think have gone extinct but are still there to be discovered, and that is just one more reason to love Australia, in my view.
Right, right. And it just highlights the fact of how much we still don't know about mammal distributions, even in relatively well-studied countries like Australia. So plenty to discover out there for all budding zoologists and mammal watchers.
Indeed.
Yeah, and how about you, John? Have you been discovering water shrews in the south of England or not?
Yeah, apparently Leadbetter's possums are easier to find than water shrews. As you'll hear in the podcast we recorded earlier, I was excited when I was talking to Nigel Marven about the potential. I had the potential to see a water shrew last weekend when I was back in the UK. I had good information, but 4 jet-lagged hours straight off the plane staring at a pond in Bedfordshire did not deliver a water shrew. So this is fast becoming one of my nemesis mammals. Damn them.
You have to have at least one or two nemesis mammals, John. You've done pretty well on the rest of them, let's face it.
It's just not appropriate to be a nemesis mammal, but it's turning into one. Yeah. I also wanted to talk a little bit about the website, mammalwatching.com, which I guess not everyone who listens to this podcast would know or use very often. But for those who do use it or those who want to, then we'll be doing some work over the summer, tweaking it a little bit, adding a few new features. So if there's anything about the website that you think you don't like or could be easier to find or use, or any new feature you think would be great, please do drop me a line at mammalwatching@gmail.com, and we can see if we can do something about that. And one of the newer features of the site, which I wanted to plug now, is there's a join a trip page on the website. I'll include a link in the notes, but it's under the community tab. And really, people who are traveling independently and looking for company to share costs are using this more and more now. And my daughter Katie, who does the Mammal Watching Recap, rather cruelly calls it the Lonely Hearts Club. But I know a lot of people are finding company and trips from this feature. So I encourage you, if you want to take a trip, you don't want to do it alone, and take a look. Or if you're planning a trip and you have a destination in mind but need other people to come along, then do think about posting on mammalwatching.com. And also, I'll plug a couple of trips I'm involved in leading, guiding, being on. One is a trip next year to northeastern Brazil. It'll be next May 2026. That will be with the great Regina Ribeiro, really guiding it, but I'll be there too. And we're looking for a bunch of endemic primates and some of the really rare endemic porcupines up there. There'll be lots of other stuff, but that's going to be a really nice trip, I think. I'll put a link to that in the notes. And the other trip, which I am super excited about, is the mammalwatching.com floating conference or trip to Antarctica in 2027. There's a bunch of us on that trip now. I think about 15 or so have signed up, including me and my daughter Katie. So if you're interested in seeing Antarctica, but you want to see it in the company of mammal watchers who can make sure the boat looks at mammals, not just birds, then this is the chance. I think it's going to be a great trip. So please do check that out if you're interested.
Yeah, those should both be really excellent trips. And obviously, the website, great resource. There's lots of things on the website which I think people don't really know about. And so it's worth people just going on and having a little browse around.
Yeah, thanks, Charles. So
Yeah,
yeah, browse around. Any ideas, let me know, and we can think about how to improve it.
indeed.
So Charles and I are very happy today to be joined by Nigel Marven, who for many of you will need no introduction. He's a British wildlife TV presenter, naturalist, conservationist, author, and television producer. He spent 12 years working closely with David Attenborough at the BBC. And you might know him as the presenter of UK TV shows like Chased by Dinosaurs and Walking with Dinosaurs, or from some of his many other wildlife films and TV from around the world. And I was reading on Wikipedia, he has an impressive list of other accolades, including, and get this, Katie Hall, including being the official character in the Minecraft game. Yes, I'm talking to a real life Minecraft character, and he's also had one of the ancestors of the thylacine named after him. How cool is that? Nigel, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, nice to speak to you. I was very proud to have an animal named after you, especially one as exciting as a thylacine. That was
I know it's not a tapeworm or something; it's a cool one. Yeah.
Better than any television award or anything like that. No, it was a fabulous accolade to get that.
Yes, welcome, Nigel. Good to see you again. Good to have you on the podcast. So why don't we kick off by you telling us how you became interested in wildlife in the first place?
Yeah, I was never interested in anything else. I used to race stick insects, walking sticks on the washing line, never had train sets or cars. And I love Gerald Durrell books. Those of you out there that haven't read My Family and Other Animals, it's a great book. Seeing the island of Corfu and the animals that Jerry finds through the eyes of a child, and that was inspiration. Of course, I watched Life on Earth and the David Attenborough series. So I've never been interested in anything else. I've always had a lot of reptile pets. I've got tortoises and black Argentinian tegus and all sorts of creatures like that, all captive bred, of course. No reptile should be taken from the wild anymore. And it then carried on from there. So I did botany and zoology at university, terrible at maths and statistics, so I couldn't really continue in science. I would have liked to have worked in a zoo or a museum, perhaps, but then, of course, I got the opportunity. I went to university at Bristol, the Natural History Unit. The Hollywood of wildlife filmmaking is just up the road, and I got the chance to get a job as a worm wrangler. That was my first job in TV. I was wrangling worms to make them go in the right direction for the cameraman. And then they said, would you like to work on Sir David Attenborough's series about the Mediterranean called First Eden? I said, I think I could fit that in, actually wanting to do a black backflip over the table. I was so excited, like a dream come true. Got a job as a researcher on that, and then I've been making wildlife films ever since.
You mentioned My Family and Other Animals. Being a Brit, I was shipped off to boarding school at an early age. And the only good thing that came out of that was the fact that I was able to get My Family and Other Animals put on the official English reading list. So,
oh, fantastic.
Yes, a major achievement. So fantastic book. If anyone hasn't read it, you really should.
Yeah, no, it's inspirational. My second job in television after the first Eden Attenborough's one was being the assistant producer on the first series of My Family and Other Animals with Brian Blessed and Hannah Gordon. So I spent 6 months on the island of Corfu, and I was responsible for, directing the sequences where the gecko fought Geronimo, fought Madam Cyclops, the mantis. I was responsible for working out how we could get a one-eyed tortoise for the scene there, how Jerry would catch old Plop and all of those things. So that was my first ever job, and that really was a dream come true. In fact, my son his name is Theo. He's 22 now, but he's named after Theodore Stephanides, who was the tutor in the book, who Jerry loved. And also there was a lovely actor called Chris Godden, who I really liked, and he played Theodore in the drama series. So I named my son Theo after those characters.
Nice. That book means a lot to both of you, obviously, and the stories. Can you talk a bit more about your career? Then how did you get to where you are from there?
I then went on to do Realms of the Russian Bear, a series there, Super Sense. I was assistant producer on that. That was the first time where birds and mammals were trained, so we could track with flying birds with cameras, and you really went into the animals world. We did a lovely scene in Jersey Zoo with gorillas, seeing how gorillas could see, and the keeper took the camera in the cage with hand-reared starlings. Starlings have obviously got a very different vision to gorillas. So some lovely things there. And then after Realms of the Russian Bear, I made my own films, a film about snakes, a film about Magpie in the Dock, a drama about whether a magpie is actually a villain. And then for some reason, British TV couldn't get Steve Irwin shows, and even though I'd never thought about being in front of the camera before, I was too shy to do that. They said, "Oh, can you do a screen test this was for ITV. So I left the BBC to become a presenter. And I did a series called Giants, where I compared myself to the biggest animals around today. So I, stood next to a Kodiak bear, and I did all of those other things, met polar bears in the wild. And then it carried on from there. And the people that did Walking with Dinosaurs, I think it's the 25th anniversary of that. There's a new series starting on the BBC One tonight. They've remade that series. But the people that made it thought, wouldn't it be brilliant to give scale to our creations and send a man back in time to meet the dinosaurs? And that's how Prehistoric Park and Chased by Dinosaurs and all of those things happened. And then I've carried on from there, producing films. I think George Clooney once said it's because he was a producer director, it's nicer to be the painter, not just the paint. So and certainly with the lower budgets that I have, we don't have the mega budgets of an Attenborough series or something. It's much easier to be able to do it all yourself. And also I can choose little creatures that wouldn't make it into one of those big blockbuster wildlife series.
Yeah, interesting what you say about the wildlife series and just how they're made. So the impression that I'm getting is that 20 years ago, they would send out wildlife filmmakers out into the field for 2 years, give them a budget and say, make a film about X or Y. Is that still happening? Do people still go out to the field for those extensive periods of time, or have things changed? And if so, how has wildlife filmmaking changed?
Yeah, it's changed slightly. So there used to be, I'm sure you remember it, a strand called Survival by Survival Anglia, and they would give a cameraman a certain amount of money and say, make a film about stoats, and you've got 2 years to make it. Or Alan Root was in Africa, make a film about the savannah and all the animals you find there. Those things don't happen now. It's much more controlled, but the budgets can be huge. So for Netflix and Apple and Amazon, maybe £2 to £3 million an hour for them to make the programs that they make. And they would spend 150 days in the field to get a snow leopard hunting a blue sheep. They would spend 100 days on a ship getting orcas attacking blue whale calves. So there's big budgets, and it's amazing how much, the cameramen are brilliant about what they do. My shows are completely different. We have a maximum budget of say £80,000 for 1 hour, and rather than filming for 200 days, we have to film for 10 to 20 days. And there was a critic in the London Times who said, watching the David Attenborough show, it's like taking a drive around the countryside in a Rolls Royce. Watching a Nigel Marven show is like making the same journey in a battered Ford Fiesta. And both of those experiences are good, because we would soon get tired if every wildlife program we watch was a big landmark series with whales and polar bears. They rarely do the smaller creatures unless they've got really, really extraordinary behavior. But with mine, like when you gave your talk at Bird Fair, everyone listening to it thought, we can do that. We can go and see those echidnas. And that's what, mammal watching is doing. It's encouraging people to take trips to see these creatures for themselves. You don't have to be in the field for 100 days to see a snow leopard. Nowadays, you can do it in 7 days, if you go with the right people. And it's a golden age of bird watching and a golden age of mammal watching, because there are the experts out there that can help you do it. But wildlife filmmaking has changed. It's bigger budgets, but more technology, of course. But a lot of it is down to the cameraman in the field. Even with AI, you can't do things with AI. They've got to capture those bits of behavior, or people won't believe it anymore.
And can I just prod you a little bit on the technology issue? How has it changed? You've got digital cameras, you have tiny cameras that you can put underground, and of course you've got thermals. So how has the general filmmaking changed over the years?
Well, I think the real game changer is drones. So they're getting incredible behaviour with drones. It adds to production values. I mean, of course, you know, most of productions can't afford a helicopter, but they can afford a drone. So it shows the landscapes. It shows, for example, me, the presenter, in the landscape. They've got incredible behaviours, like sea lions working together in the Galapagos to hunt, you know, big fish, and the wolf packs hunting, which they use with drones. It's amazing how some animals aren't frightened by drones at all. I've seen a drone lift off next to a dwarf elephant in Borneo, and it hasn't even looked at it. You know, there's some animals really don't care about drones. But of course, some of these innovations, Heinz Silman, a famous German wildlife filmmaker, he was the first one to film wasps using their saw-like ovipositors to bore into wood, and he had cameras inside the wood as the ovipositor went in. He was the first one to film black woodpeckers inside the nest. So these things have been going on for so many times, but the difference today is, as you say, infrared technology, drones, and bigger budgets, really bigger budgets, so they can do anything they want. And of course, cameras now, we can, you know, keep up with them with quality 4K quality on the TV, because of course stills cameras now are fantastic. So anyone can make a film, anyone can get really amazing behavior. The people that go on your trips, if they're in the right place at the right time, they can get incredible 4K behavior with stills cameras. You don't have to have expensive video cameras anymore. So it's anyone can do it, but that means you've got to get the right behaviors. And the really big series, the landmark series, they're using incredible technology nowadays. I mean, I say the other game changer are these gimbals that stabilize the cameras on helicopters or on the side of boats, or you never now see a lion walking the savannah without the camera tracking right next to it, and that's because they've got stabilized rigs on the side of jeeps, so they can track with the mammals as they go along. So, and it's great stuff to see. I love seeing all these big wildlife programs.
Yeah, the other thing I find really impressive is when they do the zooming in with their lenses, and you will see a bear walking across a hillside, and then they start zooming out until finally you see that this bear is miles away. So that zoom technology is pretty impressive as well.
Yeah, no, even though we have much smaller budgets, every time we have to get a CN20, which is a lens that goes from 20 millimeters to 1500. Otherwise, you can't get close enough to the mammals or the birds to get the shots that you need. So even though we have low budgets, we have to pay to hire one of those lenses. The lens costs £50,000, so I can't afford one, so we hire one. And without them, you can't get the big close-ups of eyes. You can't do those amazing zoom shots that you're talking about.
Wow, it's an impressive sounding lens. I'm really glad you're making documentaries about the smaller things, because for me, at least, they're a lot more interesting often than the larger mammals. And I see you've worked with some really cool small mammals, including Russian Desmans, which is a species I would love to see. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, no, that was, I did a series called Realms of the Russian Bear with Nikolai Drostov. That was a big BBC, just when the Soviet Union was breaking up and we were allowed to go to the Far East for the first time. But that was a trip for not for my program. I did the program about the Russian Far East, Kamchatka, and I also did the program about Turkmenistan, or Turkmenia as it was then. But I helped with another program because I wanted to do it, and we went north of Moscow and worked with a scientist who had captive Desmans. So I've never seen one in the wild. I've got lovely photos of me holding one, but I've never seen a Desmond, but we got lovely shots of them swimming under the water. And, certainly on my bucket list, I hate that word, but I would love to see a Pyrenean Desmond. Have you seen one of those, John?
I have. I've seen them in Spain. I met up with some researchers who were catching them. We caught one, and I got to sort of see it and up close. But there's also a spot in the Pyrenees where they're quite reliable. People see them. Well, I don't know over the last year or so, but they were seeing them very regularly in a small pond I think in the French Pyrenees, right? Just near the border with Spain. So they're possible. And there's also places near Madrid where you can see them.
Oh, great,
Yeah,
great.
they're fascinating animals.
Yeah, no, that's why it's such a great resource. And I first heard about you when we were filming in China. I did a series called Untamed China, and we did mammal trapping there and got these incredible mole shrews. We caught our own, and that was on advice from you. And you know, incredible. And that in a film with me, you can do that. You know, here I am looking in these Sherman traps along with mammal traps. What am I going to find? And to find this extraordinary mole shrew was a fantastic thing to see. And we also did it with jerboas with the massive ears. We caught them for the
Long-eared jerboa in Mongolia.
Long-eared jerboa in pitfall traps. We did a film where we went looking for Bactrian camels in the Gobi Desert, and that was one of the cast of characters there.
Wow.
And true, extraordinary. I mean, the ears are so big that they can't go out on a windy night because they could get blown over. I mean, what an extraordinary rodent that is. And as I say, some of these smaller things are truly wonderful.
Where did you catch the mole-shrews in China? Is that in Sichuan?
Yes, we caught them in Sichuan, John. And in fact, I think it was a place called Wawushan Reserve. There was a sort of garden there, but I haven't been back there, and I'm horrified about going back there because when we were there, they were starting to put in speakers, play music, and I'm pretty sure there'll be a big hotel on top of that. And that was the place where I found my own red panda in the wild, which was fantastic. It was sunbathing we filmed it, of course. It was sunbathing on a tree trunk, but I doubt whether there's red pandas there anymore.
I think you might be impressed. I was in China at Christmas, and I didn't go back to Wawushan. There's been a lot of development. I imagine that sort of crummy, if you stayed at the hotel at the top of Wawushan, that sort of damp place is now probably more like a Japanese hotel with heated toilet seats and everything. But the wildlife's doing really well. There's a lot of Chinese people out looking for things. They were being very respectful, and I just think conservation inside China seems to be going really well from that visit. So I was really, really impressed with what's happening in China. And I think there are still red pandas at Wawushan. Don't know about mole shrews. I caught them in the same place as you, so that's good to know that you.
Yeah, no. Well, we followed your what you'd written, your report about it, and that's very good news. I mean, there certainly was a groundswell with birds of people in China, bird watching societies starting up. So it's great that that's happening. You know, I'll never forget seeing a red panda, and I'm so pleased that they're still in Wawushan.
One of the things about the Pyrenean Desman is that it seems to be disappearing from pretty much all the places where it used to be quite common. And they suspect it's probably linked to pollution. And in fact, John, the area that you were talking about, even high up in the Pyrenees on the French side, even that place, the animals no longer seem to be there. So it's not great news for it. And Nigel, do you know what the situation is with the Russian Desman? Is there any information at all on how the population's doing?
No. Well, we did when we filmed, which was about 30 years ago. It was doing okay, but I haven't had any up-to-date information. I didn't keep in contact with the Desman scientists, so I don't know about that. I don't know how it's doing there, but I do know wetlands and marshes, as we all know, that's possibly one of the most worrying habitats of all. And we've just been in Slovakia. There's a frog there called a moor frog, and the males are brown like our common frogs, except for 4 days in spring, only 4 days, and they turn bright blue, sky blue frogs. You cannot believe that there's a frog like that in Europe. They used to be common all over Europe. We couldn't find any in Slovakia. We had to hop across the border to Hungary to film them, which will say in the film that they've declined so much that you can't see them in Slovakia. But they've only had 9 records of them in Hungary. So again, that's because these wetlands are being drained and marshes are being, you know, we thought we'd won that battle and they were being protected, but of course they're not, which is why probably, as you say, there's the demise of the Pyrenean Desman frightening stuff.
Yeah, it is. And about the mole shrews, how exactly did you go about filming them?
Because they're presenter-led shows. I mean, obviously, we didn't have to get any behaviour, and we haven't got the budgets to get lots of behaviour unless we're working with a scientist. We did Star-nosed Moles for a film I did about peculiar animals for PBS, and we worked with the scientist so we could film the star-nosed mole using those extraordinary flanges on its nose to find prey and everything. But with the mole shrew, it was like, hell, what are we going to find here? And we found a mouse species, and then I lifted up, I wonder what's in this one, and tip it out, and it's the mole shrew. I have a look at it and then let it go into the wild. So we didn't get any behaviour. It was filmed in my hand. There weren't any scientists there, as John knows, at the time, so we had to follow his report and catch our own. So some ways that's quite pleasing as well, that you're doing it yourself, really, for the film.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Indeed. I remember when I was there, I got bitten by one of the mice, and it caused a huge amount of panic amongst everyone. They were convinced I was going to die.
Yeah.
And everyone was rushing up to me, offering me different medicines and amputate my finger, and they were convinced I was going to get something awful. But I'm still here. You talked about filming in Mongolia on a trip to see Bactrian camels. And that is a challenging area to visit for many, many reasons. Can you talk about that expedition? What was it like? And also, did you see any of the near mythical goby bears while you were there?
Yeah, no, that was an interesting trip. So we had Chinese fixers helping us, and we went to Taklamakan Desert, part of the Gobi Desert, where they do their nuclear testing. We went with a bog standard expedition team that just took tourists there to see the desert. We contacted, Bactrian camels are obviously incredibly rare, much rarer than pandas are, and we contacted a team that were conserving them and said, look, we've got 3 days to see one. They said, don't even bother, you're never going to find one. But our expedition leader, we camped in the Taklamakan, said, we think we know where they are, we think you can see one. So we went there, and after literally on the 3rd day, the guide said, look, and there was a tiny speck on a sand dune, and we got closer, and it was a Bactrian camel running beautifully up the sand dune, and we got amazing shots of it. And again, they were in one of the big Attenborough series before that, and they'd spent 3 months there trying to film those, but we were there for 3 days. And of course, it wasn't the quality of footage that they've got, but it was what we strive to get all the time is what's known as a 2-shot, which is me with the animal. So the cameraman got a great shot over the shoulder of this lovely camel running up the sand dune, or the sand coming from its hooves as it ran up the dune, with me looking on and being excited. But we did not see the legendary goby bear. We'd like to have seen that. It was a great trip, and I was so excited about seeing the camels, but not. We did not see the bear.
Yeah, fantastic. And was that on the Chinese side then, not the Mongolian side?
It was on the Chinese side.
Yeah. Oh wow, I didn't even know that was possible. Amazing. Yeah. That's,
No, it was. We went from Xinjiang, I think, and if I remember correctly, and it was a very nice expedition team that took us there, and we went for 4 days, and they had ideas where the camels were, and they showed us where they'd seen the camels drinking or whatever. They weren't camel experts, and they also had very, very sharp eyes. So we went in 2 Land Rovers and managed to film them, which was very, very exciting.
Very exciting. That's a really, really hard mammal to see. Fantastic.
You did get that one on your trip to Mongolia, didn't you, John?
Yeah, we did. We only got we saw them. We went on the Mongolian side, and on the edge of the Gobi, we saw a bunch up close, and we were amazed. Like, we saw them so well, and the guide was saying, "Yeah, these are the wild ones." And then about 3 days later, we saw one animal distantly, kind of saw the car, panicked, and ran away. And then our Mongolian guide said, "Oh, this one is 100% wild." So I'm not sure what the other ones were. I think they might have been like released from a captive breeding station or something. But yeah, we only saw one, and distant, but it was good enough to sort of got snapped off a quick picture. But I love that area. It's so remote and so wild, and it's just an amazing bit of habitat. And we saw the place where the bears come on the Mongolian side. There's a kind of small, I guess, a research station where they feed them sometimes, but we saw very old tracks, but they're still around. Someone saw them a few years ago. Justin Brown saw one, I think.
Yeah, no, we only saw one camel, and that was running as well. So I think the wild ones do run as soon as they hear a car or anything, but still got lovely views of it. We sneaked up close enough to get good looks at it and good film of it.
So, Nigel, I understand that you also run mammal watching tours on top of your filmmaking. Where do you travel to? And if someone was to go on one of your trips, what could they expect?
Well, yeah, I'd started when somebody from Discovery said, "Would you like to lecture on a cruise ship?" And I said, "Definitely not. I can't imagine anything more boring than being on a cruise ship." But I did a transatlantic and loved it. The people were very nice, and I took them on a trip in Mallorca to a tortoise reserve, and we found tortoises. It's a very rare bullfinch in the Azores called the Priolo. 65 people signed up to do a cruise ship excursion to see that bird, and the money all went to conservation. So after doing that, I realised it's great getting your enthusiasm across in your documentaries, but to actually be able to share that enthusiasm with people directly, like you guys do, is fantastic. So I started doing birding trips, and then, like a lot of people, Debbie Shearwater, she ran pelagic trips off Monterey. I think she's retired now, but after doing it for a number of years, she suddenly realised that the cetaceans were just as important as the birds, and the trips pivoted around seeing marine mammals in Monterey Bay, as well as birds. So I've sort of been thinking about that, and I work with a guy called Johan, a friend of mine, got a company called the Birdway, but he spoke to another friend called Jack Smidian, and they said, well, why don't we come up with a mammal watching trip? So just come back from doing the scouting for that. We've got a place where you can see tamanduas, paca as well, which is a difficult rodent to see. I think there's a place where they come every night to see those. Northern silky anteaters. We've got a great place in the mangroves where if you do trips, you're 90% certain about seeing one of those. And then, of course, all of the commoner primates, the beds, tapir, the tyras. They're not primates, of course, but big weasels. So, and of course, wonderful bats. We've got a great bat contact there. Definitely see those lovely white tent-making bats, which are unbelievable for anyone to see. And also, there's a guy that will do mist netting for us with bats. Costa Rica's got an amazing diversity of species. So that's one trip we're doing in 2026. And the one I'm really excited about is in November of this year. We're going with Rock Jumper to Madagascar. Now, Rock Jumper are a bird watching company, but I'm collaborating with them. And I said, look, for me, the mammals and the chameleons are just as important as the birds in Madagascar. And we've got special trips organised to see shifakas and to see ring-tailed lemurs and see all the wonderful lemurs that you can see in Madagascar. And I'm very excited about that because it's a place that I've never been to. Marvin in Madagascar has a nice ring about it. Nigel Redman is the rock jumper leader. He's the guy that wrote those amazing books, Where to Watch Birds All Around the World. So he's got an extensive knowledge of travel, and he loves mammals too. He's just been on a trip to see snow leopards in Mongolia. So those are the trips I'm doing. And then, of course, I particularly love marine mammals myself. I've never seen a narwhal, so I would love to do a trip on the ice edge to see narwhals jousting in the Arctic. So that's another trip I'm trying to set up for 2027. I love sharing my enthusiasm. I'm not the expert, of course. There's local guides and mammal experts on the trip, but obviously I can chat about my filming experiences and help the guests get on to seeing the animals with my telescope and everything. So it's I really enjoyed doing it. Just had this was for a filming trip. I'd just been to Slovakia. This was truly amazing. So we went on a bird watching trip. Somebody said we're doing a film there. So there's a Rava castle. That was the place where they filmed Nosferatu, the first Nosferatu. And I said, oh, well, are there any bats in the castle? They said, we've got no bats in the castle. But in a school nearby, there's a colony of 3,000 greater mouse-eared bats. So I said, well, will the school let us film there? They agreed that we could. We went in the roof space, and just a meter above our heads, 1,000 greater mouse-eared bats. And you know that in the UK there was a colony once. Now there's only 2 of them. I mean, not because of conservation issues, just because they're right on the edge of their range. But these bats were completely unfazed by us filming them. I didn't even see one fly. They were just looking down at us. It's a maternity roost, and in a couple of weeks they'll have 1 or 2 babies each. But it was an extraordinary mammal encounter in Central Europe. So that was great as well. And of course, I'd love to take some people back to Slovakia on a mammal watching thing. Best place to see bears, 1,500 brown bears in Slovakia, some fabulous bats, beavers, of course. Incredible place called Paradise National Park, where one man has single-handedly brought European ground squirrel sussex back from the brink of extinction, and you can lay on the ground with sunflower seeds and have 100 sussex crawling all over you, which is a really fun experience for a creature that was once very rare in Slovakia. And of course, you can combine that. You can fly into Vienna and then go down the Danube on a ferry. It's only an hour to get to Bratislava, the capital of Slovakia. But in Vienna, of course, go to the Central Cemetery. Been there 3 times now, and European hamsters are guaranteed. You can get lovely views of them running amongst the gravestones and things. So some great things in Europe.
So, Nigel, where can people find details of these trips? Are they on your website?
Yeah, they're on my website, or details of the mammal watching one in Costa Rica will be on the Birdway website, or on my social media, at Nigel Marven Official on Instagram or on X. And the Madagascar trip, I've just done a post about that now, actually, and there was a webinar there talking about the lemurs that we're going to see. And of course, we will see. There's 6 bird families unique to Madagascar. We'll see a representative of each of those. It's a great 3-week trip. Details about that are on the Rock Jumper website or on my website as well.
Okay, we'll include links to all of those in the notes for the podcast. And I'm really happy to see you doing some of these tours for smaller things like the bats in Costa Rica you mentioned, and the anteater, and then the rodents in Central Europe, hamsters and sussex. Wonderful stuff.
Yes.
You've mentioned a few memorable mammal encounters and adventures over the years. Have you got any other memorable encounters or misadventures that you'd like to share?
I think my most memorable encounter, and I think I'm possibly the only television presenter that's been filmed in the wild with one, is with a giant panda. So we went to Foping Reserve. Very hard work going up and down these vertiginous slopes. And of course, pandas are very difficult because they don't stick their heads above the bamboo like deer would do. They sit on their backsides and bring the bamboo down to their mouths. So quite hard to see. But with the trackers, we managed to find a mother and cub, and remarkably, the cub was a very rare white and brown cub. So that was a pretty unique experience, and I managed to get close to that. So that was wonderful seeing that. And then the other excitement there was that there was a red and white giant flying squirrel, and I was with a cameraman who wasn't a natural history cameraman, and they were going to come out to fly at dusk. And he said, well, if I go down the valley, it could fly over my head. I said, well, that could be a bit risky. We should maybe just concentrate on the hole. He said, oh, go on, let me try. So I said, okay. So this squirrel came out, glided 100 meters down the valley, and then went 3 feet a meter over the top of the cameraman's head. So he was totally right. So that was amazing and
Fantastic.
And wonderful shot. And I'm just trying to think of I don't think I've had bad experiences filming, of course, like I went for a giant centipede to Curacao and couldn't find one, and then was told that in fact our research was wrong and they weren't found there. So that was a very expensive mistake. But with mammals, I think we put so much effort into the research to sort of be nearly sure that we're going to see them that I haven't had any bad experiences with them.
You've talked about working with polar bears and things. Have you had any kind of close encounters that were a little bit too close?
No, when we were filming with polar bears, which I've done in Svalbard and Churchill, I could never quite understand why there was always a man with a gun standing next to us when I was walking on the ice with the polar bears. But then I realised that they will hunt us down. They're one of the few mammals that, of course, will do that, and they told incredible stories about researchers that had forgotten that, and then the bear came out from under a hut and bit them badly, and of course that was their terrible story in Spitsbergen of some people being attacked by polar bears. So but I never had any. We were filming the ones, when they're waiting for the ice to form on Hudson Bay, and the big males are jousting, so they're concentrating on each other, so we could get me in front of them and film those. And I think my best ever mammal watching is, and I highly recommend it for anyone. People always say, you've traveled all around the world, what would you recommend? Go to those birthing lagoons in Baja, California, San Ignacio, with the grey whale calves. I mean, to have a creature as big as a bus bring its baby up to a small boat, and then the babies, you can tickle their tummies as if you're tickling a dog. And I had a calf that opened its mouth, it liked its tongue being tickled, so you could see the baleen plates as it rolled around like a puppy dog. So that's something that I will never ever forget. So and something that's easy to do. You can get a flight there from San Diego and stay on one of the camps around the lagoon, and that was one of my best experiences with mammals. Oh, and another one, of course, in Churchill in the summer. They've stopped it now, sadly, but you could don a wetsuit, be dragged behind a boat, and beluga whales would formate with you, and to have your head under the water, as you know, they're called the canaries of the sea, and to hear them singing under the water as you're being dragged along, and you 20 belugas with calves, next to you, would be truly fantastic. But now they've stopped that. You have to be dragged on a sort of little raft, which isn't quite as exciting as being in the water with them.
Wow, I've never heard of that. That must have been extraordinary. Yeah, lucky you.
Yeah, I actually did that as well many years ago.
Oh, well, I'm the only person on this call who hasn't done it. That's just not fair. What have I been doing with my life?
Exactly, John.
It was lovely. It's lovely hearing them singing, wasn't it?
It must be.
It really is. It's amazing. And they get so close to you.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't touch them, obviously, but they're bringing their calves in, and then, of course, they're the only marine mammal with a flexible neck, so they were turning around and looking at you and pivoting, craning around to look at you, and looks like they've got a beatific smile on their face all the time, like a sloth. So something I will never forget. Swimming with belugas was terrific.
Yeah, no, I agree. So obviously, given that you now run mammal watching tours, you've drunk the Kool-Aid, as the Americans would say. But what role do you think mammal watching can play in wildlife conservation?
Oh, I think it's incredibly important. What's happened with birds, there's a place in Ecuador where you can see ant pitters, and people pay maybe $20 to see these ant pitters, and the man has trained them to feed on earthworms, and he says, Maria, Maria, and this ant pitter comes running out of the forest. Bird watchers would never see them otherwise, and all of the forest around would have been cut down if it hadn't been for birders going to see these ant pitters. And the same is true of mammal watching. I mean, you've done that brilliant thing with the echidnas in Papua New Guinea, and people going to see them now, and the forest is being protected from mining. So I think ecotourism really has an important part to play in protecting mammals and birds and habitats.
Good to hear. Indeed. We hope so. We agree. You've talked about wanting to see narwhals. Are there any other mammals you would really love to see in the wild that you haven't seen yet?
Yeah, I haven't seen a snow leopard, so I've got a trip to Mongolia to see those at the end of August. Love to see a snow leopard in the wild. And then a common one, which is difficult to see, is an aardvark. I know there's locations in South Africa where you can see them, but I've seen aardwolves, I've seen some other difficult mammals in South Africa, but I've never seen an aardvark. And, you know, the creature that's at the beginning of the dictionary, the mammal that's at the beginning of the dictionary, and a mammal that I've actually filmed at London Zoo breaking into a termite mound, but I've never seen an aardvark. In this country, I've been lucky enough to see, there's a place near Seaton where dormice come down to feed on the bird feeders at night. So that was a wonderful thing to see. But I've never seen a water shrew in the wild, so I'd love to see those. And I love the Conrad Lorenz book where, or it may be in Desmond Morris, where he met Conrad Lorenz, and he says, I went to his office, he had a big tank and there were water shrews swimming behind Conrad. So water shrews is one that I would love to see in the wild. And a sort of slightly a side issue, whenever I go on a mammal watching trip or a bird watching trip, I always say to the people, how many times have you seen a mole? There's mole hills everywhere here, and none of them say 20 times. They'll have seen, they say, well, I've seen a dead one, or I've seen one once when it was washed out of its burrow. Moles are quite difficult to see. I have seen one in the wild, but I'd love to see a water shrew. You were smiling when I said that. Have you got sights for water shrews, or is it one that you'd like to see too?
Both. It's my nemesis UK mammal. It's the only species that's found in the UK I've not seen, but I've got a site that I'm going to check out very soon. It sounds to be super reliable in Bedfordshire. I think it's Bedfordshire. It's one of the RSPB places. So I'll get back to you if I see that. I should know quite soon, I hope.
Oh,
but it sounds promising. Yeah.
And if it doesn't work out, I've got another site in Hertfordshire with a guy that was going to take me to see them as well. So
okay.
I'll dig up my notes and maybe give those to you, because if you're going to Bedfordshire, you're close to Hertfordshire. So if you fail in Bedfordshire, that could be a great one. But
excellent. Thanks.
Again, I've seen them in the Ladybird books, those wonderful paintings by Tunnicliffe, and it's, it says it looks like a silvered creature as it takes air down with it in its fur and everything. So a water shrew would be a wonderful thing to see.
Yeah. Well, you talk about moles, and frankly, moles and pretty much all the subterranean mammals, they're the last great frontier in mammal watching, is how we like to describe it. But you've actually seen one of our nemesis mammals, which is the star-nosed mole. So that must have been pretty special.
Yeah, no, that was incredible. And that was, it was a wild one, trapped by the scientist who was studying them. And from what I remember, we put like a screen around an area where he knew they were, and then did vibrations, and it came up to the surface. And so I held it in my hand and we caught it. But he was studying, obviously got incredibly fast reactions with those tubercles on their nose. I think it's one of the fastest reactions in the mammal world. So we managed to film them, catching earthworm. It's a film I did about ugly animals. We don't think any animals are ugly, of course, but there are some creatures with a face that only their mother can love. Elephant seals for one, and all of these other creatures. Barbaroussa for another, and we did a film about those animals, explaining why they looked the way they did, the evolutionary significance of their looks. Proboscis monkeys, of course, they're another classic with a strange face. But the star-nosed moles were extraordinary. And again, seen another sequence recently in one of the BBC things where they filmed them swimming under the water. I didn't know that they swam and caught their prey occasionally. So yeah, a great creature, a great mammal.
Now, you mentioned the guy used vibrations on the soil. How did that work?
I think it was a bit like, attracting worms to the surface, like worms come up to the surface. And I think the moles were attracted by the worms, but I cannot remember actually how he did it, to be honest. I would have to look back at the film. It's called Ugly Animals on PBS, but it was a long time ago.
Right.
How interesting. I'm going to try and find this film, this vibration thing I've not heard about. So,
Yeah.
Charles,
Yeah,
have you got a didgeridoo? You can start blowing in your yard.
Yeah, I probably shot myself in the foot there, and it's nothing to do with vibrations, but he certainly knew how to find them and bring them up to the surface to catch them.
Wow, how interesting. Right.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Thanks. Nigel, that's been brilliant. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about or mention?
No, just to thank you guys. As I say, we've contacted you and used your resources for many years in our filmmaking, and it was inspirational to see you talking at the Global Bird Fair, and it's inspired me to list all the mammals I've seen. Go back, and I think I've seen nearly 500. So I'll be quite high on your list, I think. But I'm certainly going to go through that with a fine-tooth comb again, because it's obviously, when I see a bird, I instantly write down the birds that I've seen, but I wouldn't be doing it with mammals like antelopes in South Africa or antelopes in other parts of Africa. So thank you guys for inspiring me.
Oh, thanks. That's good to hear. I look forward to your mammal list appearing on the website. And Jack Samidian's been listening on the call. You helped put all this together. So thank you very much, Jack. And is your mammal list up on the website already, or
it
is?
Excellent. It's nowhere near as high as Nigel's, but it's something.
Good for you.
Yeah, Jack and I are doing a film in Bangladesh at the moment. So we've been to Bangladesh a couple of times. About the same size as England, about 175 million people there compared to 60 in the UK, and but there's still room for mammals there. So 10 species of primates. So Jack and I have been lucky to film Fairs langur and capped langur and some other great primate species. There's still elephants there. They're getting in trouble, of course, with conflicts with people, but really a very interesting country. And again, the bigger productions wouldn't go to Bangladesh because they're always going for the mass spectacles and things. But some truly extraordinary stories there that Jack and I have found out. Did an incredible sequence recently that we were just editing at the moment, where they use otters for fishing. So it's otters that they bred in captivity, and they chase the shoals of fish into the nets. And of course, that's a dying tradition, and with good reason, because using wild animals like that is something that's frowned upon nowadays. But it was a very interesting thing to see, I must say. And even though the otters weren't tethered in any way, they just follow the boat, chase the fish into the nets, and it was a great thing to see, a great partnership between people and animals.
Wow, I'm looking forward to that. When might that be out?
Finished editing it by the end of February next year.
Right.
We've got one more trip to do. We found a great student that knows about mammals on his campus, and civets and all sorts of other mammals, mongoose. So we're going to be filming with him, and big roosts of fruit bats there. So there'll be some quite interesting mammals in that program.
Excellent. How exciting. Nigel, thank you so much. Told some amazing stories of a really interesting career, from starting off as a worm wrangler to becoming someone who's found camels in the Gobi, baby pandas in China, and swum with belugas, much to my envy. And I love the stories about working with smaller creatures and putting a spotlight on those. I mean, you've done a lot of work with the giants, but working with things like Desmans and Star-nosed Moles and Mole-shrews, good on you. And I was amused by what you said about a critic had described a documentary with you as more like a battered Ford Fiesta compared to a David Attenborough Rolls-Royce trip. But I tell you what, if I was going on a mammal watching trip, I'd much rather go in a Ford Fiesta than take a Rolls Royce into some of those places that we go to. So I think it's the perfect analogy. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, John. And I hope I will meet some of your listeners on a mammal watching trip. The Costa Rica one and the Madagascar one will be superb.
And yeah, Nigel, thanks so much for bringing mammal watching to the broader audience and to worldwide attention. So much appreciated.
No, well, you guys have done that. So thank you so much. And hopefully see you again. Are you speaking at the Bird Fair again this year, or?
Not this year. No,
No.
Won't be around.
Yeah, next time. See you next time.
Yeah, hope to see you both again. Cheers.
Yeah.
Thanks, Nigel.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jack.
Great to speak, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Mammal Watching with Charles Foley and John Hall. You can find other episodes at mammalwatching.com/podcast.